welcome everybody to tonight's event. Balance Point is really excited to have so many familiar faces in one place together. If you haven't already gotten your tickets, feel free to get your tickets. There's food in the back, there's restrooms over here, and there's some restrooms out there. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speaker. So his code name, or his on-air name, is Dirty D. I don't know if you guys knew this, but Dustin was actually an on-air personality at one point in his career. He has since joined Seaboard. Seaboard Foods is the only Kansas City-based Fortune 500 company here in Kansas City. Pretty cool. So, Dustin has spent his career there, has worked his way up through the rankings. He's currently the enterprise architect and the architecture manager. And I'd like to go ahead and have you guys give him a big round of applause. It's all you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So what I wanted to talk about, this is kind of a passion of mine and something that I have definitely talked about a lot over the years in various flavors and various pieces, and that's this idea of user-centric design, right? And the core of this is this little cutesy joke that I've got up here. A user interface is like a joke. If you have to explain it, it isn't very good. So at the end of the day, whenever we talk about all of this, whenever we talk about what we do as developers, as architects, as IT professionals, we're here to solve problems. We're here to help our users out. We're here to help make life better for whatever user is using our application. So we'll go through this and we'll talk about some pieces and some things and some ideas about what that means, what it doesn't mean, and how we can maybe get better about doing it. So this is me. As Lindsay said, I've done a lot of things. I actually came up as a designer. I worked in marketing. When I worked for the radio station, I worked for, I did a lot of billboards. I did a lot of the annoying marketing stuff you've all been deluged with. I switched over and have been in IT for about the last 10 years. At this point, I'm an enterprise architect. And one of the things that I found, as I said, throughout this whole time frame is that it's basically the same work, right? The principles are the same. The conditions are the same. So let's start out here. Oh, we didn't get our images. None of the pictures showed up.
Oh, pictures. Great picture.
Wonder if that's what didn't want to copy. It is a different perspective. So go, it found transitions where there weren't. So let's talk about it this way. Whenever we talk about perspective, what do we see? We see the database. We see the code. We see maybe some wireframes, depending on which part you're on. We see a lot of things that to most users are gobbledygook, meaningful to us. What's a user see? User sees the front end. User sees an application. User sees an icon. User sees, take your age-old joke of how do I restart my internet? Well, I click the E on my desktop. That's valid to a user. So let's talk about this piece of it. Whenever we talk about a user, what's a user experience? What does that mean whenever we talk about how we think about our applications? User experience is, by textbook, everything the user sees, hears, feels, thinks, and perceives while interacting with an application. That's the sum total of everything that user does while dealing with that application contributes to the experience. Every single facet of application development contributes to user experience in either a positive or a negative way. Nothing is neutral. Everything weighs to it. Whether you're talking about the libraries, whether you're talking about your ORM, whether you're talking about your application, every part of it matters. In the absence of design, user experience is left to chance. There's a quote out there that says, at the end of the day, everything is designed. Negative design is still a design choice. The ultimate goal of every user experience is a happy user. And that sounds ridiculously obvious. We all know that. But when's the last time you thought about it? How much does it matter whenever you're making your choices about how you do things and what application you do and how your workflow goes? I'm a big fan of quotes, right? Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs is probably the most famous advocate of user experience. Design is not just what it looks like and feels like. Design is how it works. Steve Jobs, famously, such a stickler for user experience, he crashed an entire product rollout for one of the early versions of an iMac because when you pushed the power button, it felt bad. millions of dollars as a company, and he said, that doesn't matter, because what we're selling here is not iMacs. We're selling how that customer feels. And if the first thing they feel when they take it out of the box and they push the button is a bad feeling, we've lost that customer. So the flip side of that, what's user experience not? It's not the interface. It's not just the interface. It's not Photoshop graphics, it's not mock-ups, it's not HTML prototypes, it's not old school blinky HTML tags, it's not all the fancy glittery stuff everybody talks about. It's not just pretty colors, images, fonts. It's not the last minute spit shine before you kick it out the door, hope for the best. That's not user experience design. It's not just the interface. You have to look fancy, you have to make complicated masterpieces, good food, fresh ingredients. It's no different. We don't need fancy things to make a good user experience. You don't need the latest, greatest technology. You don't need bleeding edge. You need to have your head and your heart in the right place when you think about what you're doing. So what's a good user experience? Good user experience is 5 things, right? The first 3, these should be true of any solution you ever do. It solves the problem. It's quick to use. It's elegant. It does the least needed to get to where the user is trying to go. The other 2, these should go without saying. It should be predictable. Every time I push the button, I should get the same result. Doesn't matter what my code does, doesn't matter what my application does, doesn't matter what I'm trying to do. Every time I do something, I should get the same result. This last one's a big one. It should be helpful. All right, we'll talk about some other examples as we go through this, and we'll walk through a few other things. But think about all the applications you use on a day-to-day basis. Think about the things you read about in the news right now. Siri, Google Now, Amazon Echo, and Alexa. What are they trying to do? They're trying to be helpful. They're trying to be there before you ask the question. They're trying to be there ready with the information. What's the other thing they do? Stay out of the way. So helpful is important. What is needed when it's needed? So we'll keep this in mind because we're going to come back to this as we talk about some other things. So why do we care? What's any of this matter, right? We're developers, so our job is to put stuff out. We crank out code. No, that's a byproduct. That's how we get there. So first and foremost, users are the driving force behind all technology. I don't care how great your code is. If it doesn't have a single user, it is worthless. It has no value in and of itself. It is only meaningful in that it helps some user do some task. All technology exists to solve problems. Technology has no intrinsic value. My laptop is useless unless I do something to use it. Users are the ultimate benchmark of an application. I can go to my users and I can lay out facts and facts and facts about how we made all these decisions. And look, I shaved 0.2 of a millisecond off your application processing time. And my user says, great, but I hate blue. Why is the application blue? I failed. I asked the wrong question. I solved the wrong problem. And all my fancy benchmarks don't matter because what matters is how my user felt. It doesn't matter who they are. Making them happy has benefits to it. Let's say you work in a commercial setting. Making your users happy drives downloads, it drives page counts, it drives views, it drives money. Let's say you work in a corporate setting like I do. Every time I make my users happy, my budget goes up. Right? Every time I make my users happy and I go back and I go, hey, I got you this, and look how happy you were with that. Now you said you want this, I need 5 more people. It's a way easier conversation than if they turn around and go, you gave me this thing, but I hate it. No, you can't have 5 more people, and in fact, fire 3 of them. At the end of the day, how your users feel about your app is the only metric that matters. Plain, simple, sweet. This is another one of those. Jonathan Ive, if you don't know, is the designer behind all of Apple's big stuff. He's the guy Steve Jobs went to whenever he said it's got to be beautiful and it's got to work. Jonathan Ive says there's beauty when something works and it works intuitively. Even if it's the simplest thing in the world. If I've got a chair, I can pull my chair out and I can sit down. It's not going to break. There's beauty in that. It's functional. It does what I need it to do. Even if it's not the greatest, most expensive Eames chair you've ever seen, there's a beauty in something that works, that solves a need, that works exactly as you expect it to. So let's talk about this. User-centric design is a way of life. More people use technology in their day-to-day lives than ever before. I guarantee you everybody in this room has a cell phone. That cell phone is more powerful than anything we ever saw on Star Trek back in the day when we were growing up. You have more computing power in your pocket playing Twitter right now, playing some random Angry Birds game, than anybody 10 years before us, 20 years before us, 30 years before us even dreamed. And every single person you meet is going to have one. Everybody is a user, CEOs to toddlers. I have small kids. My kids could type before they could write. My kids know their login names and their passwords better than they know their actual birthdays. All the way up through CEOs. Some CEOs could use some help with their logins and their passwords and their typing. But everybody is a user. Everybody's experiencing it. What was the mantra? So I'm sticking to Apple as my example. The mantra whenever the iPhone came out. There's one button. Why is there one button? Because literally anybody should be able to pick it up and use it. This one, Google realized this. Powerful technology is a commodity. We've all got it. I can buy the equivalent of a supercomputer off the rack at Best Buy, less than $300. Smart companies compete on design. Design gets you happy users. Design solves problems. Technology is a budget question. Every single facet of your application affects your user. Design accordingly. I'm hyping on this because it's important. Whenever we talk about all the things that we do and all the decisions that we make as developers, as architects, as IT professionals, the important metric we should be asking ourselves in all of that is, how do I help my users by doing that? So what does this look like whenever you do it in practice? It looks like Alfred, right? It's the gentleman's gentleman. User-centric design says, I solve a problem. I get out of the way. I'm ready to help, right? It's your old school English butler saying, I'm invisible. I'm not here. You don't need me. I'm never in the way. Oh, you wanted a drink? Here it is. Ready to go. Again, Siri, Alexa, all of those pieces. This is where user-centric design goes. The value and the goal and the methodology here is, how do I make sure that I'm helping my user without getting in the way of my user? So let's talk about some examples. Right? It's obvious, but this is what they do. It is an entire company built around selling a user experience. They sell that user experience because they happen to sell a product. That's fine. If you went and talked to Steve Jobs, if you go talk to Tim Cook, Apple doesn't sell iPhones. Apple doesn't sell iPads. Apple doesn't sell iWatches. Apple sells user experience, and they package it in a box with an iPhone. Every single aspect of how Apple sells their product, down to how it feels when you take the lid off the box for the first time, what it looks like, how everything is laid out, passed through Steve Jobs' personal inspection. You know why you don't get an instruction manual whenever you buy an iPad? You don't need one. They put one in at first because it was standard. Steve Jobs opens it up, and he opens the box, and he looks at it, and the first thing that greets him is an instruction manual. He says, I didn't buy an instruction manual. I bought an iPad. It's wrong. Take it out. So they said, OK, well, I'm going to put it underneath. He said, no, I didn't buy an instruction manual. Take it out. If somebody needs an instruction manual, you didn't do your job. So what do you get now? You buy an iPad, you open it up, and what are you presented with? The box slides off. It's high-quality cardboard. It's perfect white, pristine. You slide the box off, and the tablet's right there. First thing you see. You can push the button, it fires up, and it says, hello. All of that was planned. They focus 100% on perfecting the user experience to the very smallest detail. So let's talk about the polar opposite example. Right? Google came up as a company with one metric. Make it fast. Google's first product was a mail engine. Their mail engine model was, how can I be faster than everybody else out there? Whenever they came up with a search engine, right, that made Google literally a verb, right? Oxford recognizes Google as a word now. The goal was, I have one field. If I go to google.com, I type what I'm looking for, I push one button, and it pops up. Now look at Google. I go to my phone, I go to Chrome, I start typing, it suggests what it thinks I might be looking for, and 4 or 5 other options. It corrects my spelling for me while I'm at it. I don't even have to push a button, I just hit enter and it goes, right? Then if I go search for the Royals game, it's going to tell me the Royals play tonight at 6. Traffic looks like this on the way to the stadium. You're X number of minutes away based on your location. The score from last night's game was this, and their standing looks like this. I haven't even clicked into a search result yet. Google is trying to be helpful. Google is trying to say, here's the things I think you might want. Let me present them for you and then get out of your way. Said speed is the only benchmark. 2011, Google started a project called Project Kennedy. Project Kennedy is what's now become known as material design. If you work on Android platforms at all, you've heard of material design. Google literally created a group that is an autonomous team at the highest levels. Every single product Google works on, material design has an input. More relevantly, material design has a veto. If somebody comes up with the best, coolest, most awesome piece of tech ever, material design can come in and delay a launch and say, nope, it doesn't go out until we've had a chance to clean it up, until it gets fixed, until it meets our corporate standards. This isn't a one UX developer toiling away in a corner somewhere hoping for the best and praying nobody remembers he works there because they're going to fire him. This is an executive-sponsored thing. They answer to Sergey and Larry, right? This is where the world has gone. So let's talk about a little bit of an off-case example. Squarespace. We've seen the commercials. They're all right. It's a pretty good product. This is the interesting part. Squarespace, whenever they stood up, they looked at all the other software companies out there. They said, we want to help people build websites. So they looked at all the other companies that have ever helped people build websites. You know what they found? People hated them. It was a chore. It was a thing you dreaded having to deal with because their target audience is not developers. We're going to build our own. Their audience is users. So they modeled themselves after luxury brands. They went and looked at Prada. They looked at Coach. They looked at Marcella Margiela. They looked at all of these, and they said, what are they selling? You know what they found? Product experience for one user. If you go to Coach and you say, tell me how you design these bags that sell for this ridiculous amount of money. And they said, we make a bag that one woman wants. And then we tell everybody else. And they go, I want it too. The other thing they found, user experience as a brand. At Squarespace, they guarantee their #1 corporate mission. You will never find a pixel out of place. You will never find a field that doesn't work. You will never find a drop down that misaligns. Their whole model is I'm going to sell you a user experience that you are comfortable and happy and feel good about while you're doing this thing you really didn't want to be doing, but you're happy about doing it now. Again, they modeled it after luxury fashion. If you go buy a Prada bag, you're never going to find a stitch out of place. You're never going to find a missing rhinestone. If you do, you got some questions to ask. Squarespace model, there's the same way. So for every decision, this is the end point of this, right? This is where we talk about what's really meaningful. For every single decision, this is your feedback loop. What am I doing and how does it affect my user? Does it help them? If so, I should do it at whatever cost it may take. Does it hurt them? There's some details out of that, right? The big ones are obvious. Does it solve their problem better? Does it get their tasks done faster? Does it improve their quality of life? Does it cut out a step? Does it match what the user expects? This one gets missed a lot, right? I've used the joke before and the example before. What's a save button look like? It's a floppy disk. My kids have no idea what that is. They've never seen a floppy disk in their lives. They probably never will. But they know what save does. They can find a save button that looks like a floppy disk in every application, no matter what. Design standards, that's what that's for. Here's the other one to think about, right? Lest we take this too far to the extreme. Sometimes making choices because they improve your ability to deliver enhancements is worthwhile. I'm going to use an ORM instead of writing my own data access layer. Does that help my user? Maybe. Maybe it even hurts me. Maybe I lose a little bit of performance. But I can turn around enhancements once a month instead of once a quarter. That helps my user. Is my user willing to take that trade-off of milliseconds of performance in exchange for better enhancements and better code? Yeah, probably. Reliability is a user experience concern. Okay, so how do we do it? We've talked a lot. What's this mean? Step number 1, understand and define, right? I can't solve a problem if I don't know what the problem is. Understand, defining a problem is not a sentence. That's a start. That's a great way to go. You got to get something on paper. Now keep going. So some tasks, some things you can do. Observe. Wouldn't say it outside this room, but treat your users like the zoo. right? Go watch the animals in their natural habitat and see what they do. I bet you'll be surprised. Analysis. Think about it. Take a look, right? See what happened. Look at your users. Ask them questions. Personas, from a design standpoint, are always helpful. What's my user look like? What's my average user? What's my non-average user? What's my edge case? Use cases are handy as a way to step through. What's my user do? What are my tasks and projects and aspects? This is kind of my graphic design side showing. I love storyboards, even more than workflows. Workflows are handy, but they can be a little abstract, a little obtuse. Draw a storyboard. My user's going to log into this application, and then they're going to do what, and then they're going to do what, and then they're going to do what. Put them in sequence. I'll tell you, I've done it before where I've drawn them all on a bunch of Post-it notes and stuck them back together and flipped through them. You'd be amazed. CEOs go, oh, I get it. It's going to do this. Process flows. I'll speak to my PM friends. Process flows are handy. Scope statements. I put this on here intentionally, and I thought about it a couple of times. Scope statements are a user concern. What's my app going to do? What's it not going to do? Let me set my expectations, and let me make sure that I meet my expectations. I've been on a lot of projects, I'll fess up here, where we start out and we go, okay, I'm going to make this for the user. And then we go, oh, look at the shiny. 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 And then we end up and we're 90 degrees away from where they ever wanted to be. That's not solving the problem. Scope statements help you go, wait, ignore that shiny. We'll get to that shiny later. We're talking about this shiny. Project charters do the same thing. Showing my corporate speak, but you can do the same thing whether you're in corporate or not. Step number 2. I tore off my transitions apparently, but ask. Prototypes. Prototypes are great. Not everybody can think abstractly. Developers tend to be pretty good at it, but not everybody's wonderful. User testing is always handy. A/B testing, multivariate testing, expectancy, performance. There's a lot of ways to do that, right? You can get into a lot of words. You can spend a lot of money. At the end of the day, what it boils down to is show them something and then go, what do you think? Usage analytics are great. We run into it all the time. We built a thing. Does anybody still use it? I don't know. Yeah, I should be able to go back and look at an app that's been running and look at my analytics, and if nobody's using it, that app's a problem. Maybe technically it's not a problem. Maybe it's fine in my stack, but if nobody uses it, something's wrong. User acceptance testing. Again, corporate world showing. It would sure be wonderful if the users, before you put something in production, looked at it and went, yep, that's exactly what I wanted. It's kind of a pipe dream. Surveys, focus groups. This is just fancy words for asking for stuff. Reviews. Go ask them for a book report. You won't get them, but a couple of folks will, and the ones that really have strong opinions will give you something. Somewhere in between these two, design. Design is patterns, right? Let's start at the top here. This is one of my favorite quotes. Steal like an artist. Everything you see is inspiration. Design patterns, user behaviors, industry leaders. Literally every single thing you've ever seen. How your car works, right? This is another one of my favorite examples. I got a car. Whenever I go to walk up to my car door now, key fob in my pocket, I don't have to take the fob out and touch it. I walk up, I touch the handle, the inside of the handle, the car unlocks. Siemens looked at this, working for Mercedes, and said, why do users have to take a key out and push a button on the fob? I know they've got the keys because I've got a sensor. I know when the user walks up and lays hand on the car door, they probably want to open it. Unlock the car, cut out a step. Every aspect of life has opportunities. Steal it. This is what all the greats did. Da Vinci was huge on this, right? What did I see? Let me draw nature. Let me turn it around. Let me twist this a little bit. Steal everything you can steal and put it back together in other ways. This is big right now in the design world. I'm not talking about minimalist design, right? I'm not talking about flat colors, plain textures. I'm talking about reduce it to the minimum that is useful. Right? Hemingway said, kill your darlings. He was talking about writing, but what he meant was go to a sentence and take every word that doesn't tell you something about that sentence and cut it out. It's useless. If it means something, if it adds value, if it paints a better picture, keep it in. It's important. This one's huge. Like I said, talking about Squarespace. Respect the details. The little things, right? The devil's in the details, and that means something. Polish, more than anything, is about making sure that all your little pieces are right and that everything lines up and everything's square. On a UI, that means making sure that your transitions are smooth. It means making sure that your pixels line up. It means making sure that nothing page breaks weird. From a UX perspective, whenever you talk about the inside, the back-end code, it means making sure that all of your functions work as expected. It means making sure you unit tested for all the crazy scenarios so that users don't get weird stuff coming out. It means making sure that you stepped through their process, both the way they do it and the way they might do it. It's kind of a generic one, but I think it's meaningful. Take thoughtful actions. That means don't do something just because you do it and blank out and walk away. Have a reason for everything you do. Have a thought behind it so that if anybody ever comes in and says, why did you code this way? Why did you use that ORM? Why did you make this blue? You should always have an answer. Now, you can argue about whether it's the right answer, but you should have an answer. This one's handy and it's easy to forget. Discuss with peers. Talk about things. Chat. You can learn a lot. Different opinions, different perspectives. You'll learn things you never even considered. The last one, use it yourself. Every application viral that you've read about of late came out because somebody had a problem and they wrote a thing that solved it for themselves. And then they showed it to a buddy and they went, hey, that's cool. And they showed it to somebody else. That's cool. Everybody's got basically the same stuff. We're all trying to do basically the same things. Use your app yourself to do whatever you're trying to do. If it's frustrating for you, your user will hate it. If it's not frustrating for you, your user might still hate it. But you at least have some background and a conversation you can have about it. That's what I've got. So. Some references and stuff, I'll leave that up in case anybody's curious. Yeah. Some really good books.
I'd like to go ahead and open up the floor.
Please.
Some discussions, and then also do a little bit of question and answer and see who is paying attention. So, do any of you have questions for Dustin that you'd like to ask?
Can I take a picture of your reading list?
By all means. I'll get my fat head out of the way.
Maybe you can talk to the group about if you're doing user design and then you're pushing it out to a mobile device, and it's, you know, the differences between what you have to think about for a desktop or for an internal application as opposed to external website like event stations and things like that.
Yep. So there's a really good one from a use case standpoint. Desktops, most of the time nowadays, standard basic resolution is 1280, right? Most desktops, you're not going to find one for less than, 23 inches? Even a laptop's got 13 inches. An iPhone has a screen about 4 inches across. That's a huge difference, even if the resolution is higher. So don't mistake resolution numbers for letting you think that you can do the same things. The other one to consider when you're on a mobile application, again, thinking about user behaviors. So I'll tell you, I'm terrible about pulling my phone out every time I'm in line. I've completely got Apple ADD. And so every time anything stops for more than 10 seconds around me, I pull my phone out and look at my Twitter, look at my Facebook, play a game, whatever, right? So remember that whenever you're talking about mobile design, you're talking about quick bursts of activity. You're talking about things that have to be touch sensitive. You're talking about things that, by and large, you're not talking about somebody who's sitting down and doing long-term data entry. And if they are, you should probably ask yourself why you're doing mobile and if there's a really good reason for it. The other consideration of it, of course, is data. That's less of a concern since everybody's got massive multi-gig plans now, but not every network is awesome. I'm from Oklahoma, and cell phones are a thing that they kind of just discovered fairly recently in terms of real networks. So I assume that everything that I can do here in KC, I go back home and my phone basically turns into a really fancy brick. So think about those kind of concerns.
Other questions from the group?
So what do you see are the themes or the buzzwords that you're finding when you're talking to like C-level executives to get buy-in?
Yep. So the big ones that I hear all the time, efficiency is always the play. I can tell you for my company in particular, we run kind of ridiculously lean. And so everything is about, it's not even necessarily about avoiding adding headcount, it's how can I never have to hire anybody else ever again? How can I make the software do as much as possible for me? The other big one that I hear from my user base all the time, less so from the C-levels, surprisingly, but on the other side is, why do I have to be at my computer? Right? Taking the same question. If I'm going to this and it's a web application, why do I need to be at my desk? Why can't I go home? Why can't I do it on my phone in the car? We've been a mainframe shop for a really long time, and so the answer was always, well, it's an AS400, you can't. Now we're on a web app, and the answer kind of needs to be, you can, give me a minute. Well, that's it. Yeah, security is always a concern, but no C-level ever talks about that.
Other questions?
Is the presentation going to be mailed out to us, or?
Good question.
Mailed out, or is
I can do that.
We'll get a copy from Dustin.
Yep.
Make sure your name is on the sign-in sheet. We can send it on out to you. Okay, so now a couple of questions. These are actually going to my Vin Solutions friends. Okay. So has your team ever? I know you're DevOps and a little bit of back-end SQL, more reporting type stuff, but do you know, has your organization ever sent a team out to the dealerships to actually observe and watch how they're using the CRM tool, what that looks like, taking notes, kind of done that research and analysis?
There are some teams, we actually have trainers that go out to every dealership that's bringing on our CRM form.
Talk a little louder, please.
So we do have teams that go out and actually train the dealerships on our software, and while they're out there, they're taking notes of, like, we release features constantly, and so they're taking notes on how these new features come out, how hard it is for some of them, because we found out recently our systems are really complicated on some of them, and the way the screens flow after another may not be the best user experience, and so it's driving some change, and they're actually going through a whole UI rehaul right now, within by the end of the year it should change, but they have that constant influx of input from all those trainers. We also have our product owners. We do have some people out and talk with them all the time to kind of get their feedback, because if we don't, then we're not making the best product for the customer.
Robin, do you have something you want to add?
We just had an all-hands meeting today, so this is kind of fresh on all of our minds. And
Good.
yeah, kind of this presentation ties into what we were seeing earlier today. The concept is you've got to have product, you've got to have engineers, and you've got to have QA.
Right.
And for our shop, somewhere in there to bring all that together, we call it agile. So you've got to have project management going on that says, are you going to build up a huge reservoir of work and then dump it over the edge, or are you going to iterate very quickly and start responding to what product is bringing to the table, which is a direct reflection of talking to customers. And so that whole spin and trying to make sure that the triangle is very well balanced. The focus in today's discussion was on QA, but it was tying back into this presentation with respect to the user experience, the UI.
It's all the same.
Q, quality was the big deal, was the user as your real, like you said, metric. It's how their experience is and how we need to make it better for them, and is driving that. And is relational to this very much so.
Yeah.
So on the kind of same topic, one of the things that I saw, I've been kind of looking at TOGAF certification, and one of the things they teach you in that one, when you're talking about architecture on a system, right? As developers, you often go, okay, well, I want to architect the system, and it's going to have this code and this layout and this database and whatever. TOGAF says, okay, go start with my business architecture. What's my flow? What's my data architecture? Now what's my application architecture? And then get down into the technical pieces. But that sounds so simple, but it's that same mind-blowing kind of shift of what's my business do? What do my dealers need to do? And then how do I make an application that does that? Not, here's my application, dealers, you can now go do this.
Well, another thing that came up today at our meeting that kind of goes along with what you're saying, as developers or IT professionals, understand what your product does. And, many times development, you've been thrown in on a team that you have no clue what the code's doing or anything like that. And you go build this one function, but you have no clue it's going to cause performance issues or anything else. And, your one little DB call, yeah, it's only this big, but, well, you forgot it's a select all from.
Yep.
And, it's in a transaction that doesn't close this, it's.
Yep. Works fine on my system.
Yeah, it works
Well, cool.
great here, it works great on 4 machines, but when you put out in prod on hundreds of servers, and yeah, it just kills it. So that was one of the biggest things that adds to your user-centric is you got to understand what you're doing to be able to understand what they need, to understand what you can do for them. And
Good. And because you answered first, you get to go to coffee with me
awesome.
next week sometime. Okay? All right. In Dustin's presentation, what company used user experience as a brand? Kelly. Squarespace.
Squarespace.
I know what you meant.
Square
I know what you
something.
meant.
Square something.
Yep. So
You must have kids, huh?
your team actually gets donuts, and Taylor, where's Taylor at? Did she duck out of here? Ashley, you and I this week, next week, have to get over to Affinity to get his team some donuts. So keep me. Take note. I got you. All right. Okay. What is the name of the project that Google rolled out? Tyler. What was it?
Material design.
Sort of. Not quite.
Kennedy.
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 Very good, Greg.